He walked out with his mistress, so I left the DNA results waiting on the kitchen table. Olivia Bennet's mornings were usually quiet, the kind of calm that settled gently over their modest Boston apartment. She would wake before dawn, the soft glow of the streetlights casting long shadows across the pale kitchen walls as she prepared coffee for Michael. His charm had first drawn her in years ago. The easy smile, the way he listened when she talked. To everyone around, they seemed like the perfect couple navigating life's ups and downs together, holding tight to small moments of joy amid the grind of ordinary days. But beneath the surface, Olivia carried a quiet weight, a persistent uncertainty she couldn't quite shake. Their love felt unsteady lately, like walking on thin ice she dared not break. This tension came to a head on a chilly autumn evening at the annual company gala, a night Olivia had promised herself she would attend without anxiety. The event was lavish, held in a downtown hotel ballroom shimmering with crystal chandeliers and filled with faces she recognized but didn't know well. Michael was there, wearing a tailored suit that made him look even more confident than usual. He greeted friends and colleagues with a practiced smile, his arm casually linked with Olivia's. But Olivia couldn't ignore the flicker of unease when she caught a glimpse of his gaze darting away, as if seeking something else lurking just out of sight. Her heart sank when she noticed Amanda entering the room. Amanda, Michael's assistant, the woman whose name had whispered through Olivia's mind like a dark shadow. Amanda was radiant, her poise, her effortless smile, the way she moved with a boldness Olivia never possessed. And then came the moment Olivia's world fractured. Through the glittering crowd, she saw Michael and Amanda approach together, arms entwined, their laughter blending almost too naturally, faces close as if the rest of the world didn't exist. They didn't even glance her way. When Michael finally caught Olivia's eye, there was an unspoken barrier between them, a coldness that hit her deeper than any words could. The room seemed to tilt. Conversations went on around her, but Olivia felt stripped bare, an unwanted spectator in a cruel performance. A colleague passed by, nodding awkwardly, but Olivia sensed their pity more than support. She felt invisible, abandoned. Michael's clear choice to appear with Amanda that night wasn't just betrayal, it was a public declaration that Olivia was secondary, a figure in the background at best. The realization tore through her with a sharpness that made her knees weak. She barely noticed the applause ringing out for some toast until Amanda reached out, brushing Michael's arm with a possessiveness that seared Olivia's skin with humiliation. Back at home later, the space that once promised comfort now felt hollow and unbearable. Olivia sat silently at the kitchen table, the hum of the city outside, unable to drown the storm raging in her mind. How could everything she believed in unravel in a single evening? The bouquet of roses Michael had given her 2 days ago lay forgotten on the counter, their petals bruised and wilting, a symbol of love betrayed. Questions pounded relentlessly. Was the life she cherished a facade? Was the man who once whispered promises just an illusion? As dawn crept through the window, Olivia's phone buzzed, a message she had been dreading, but also somehow needed. The lab results she'd submitted a week earlier. She had feared what they might say, the truth hidden beneath the sterile, white envelope she now unfolded with trembling hands. Her breath caught as she stared at the paper, every letter a silent verdict that threatened to change everything again. The fragile tension in the room thickened. Olivia knew this was only the beginning of a battle she hadn't chosen, but could no longer avoid. The morning light did little to soften the weight pressing down on Olivia's chest. The sterile sheet in her hands wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a silent judge, a verdict she wasn't ready to confront but couldn't ignore. Her mind spun with questions, memories of the night before colliding with a raw ache that throbbed beneath her skin. The tooth she held felt like a weapon and a wound all at once. She wanted to shred the paper, erase the evidence of betrayal, but something deeper anchored her in place. Her phone vibrated again. It was a message from Amanda. The simple text, "We need to talk," sent a cold shiver down her spine. Olivia knew this wasn't about closure. Amanda's tone was silk over steel, a calculated move in a game Olivia hadn't wanted to play, but found herself unwillingly caught in. She slipped the DNA results back into the envelope and let her fingers tremble over the worn edge of the kitchen table. The silence in her apartment was suffocating, but stepping outside felt unbearable. At work, whispers floated like a haze around her, the kind of quiet cruelty that doesn't need loud words. Olivia's colleagues exchanged glances when she entered the office, no eyes flickering too quickly to be accidental. The air was thick with unspoken judgments, as if the small town within the company had already chosen sides. Michael's affair wasn't secret anymore. The truth was spreading, and with it came a swelling tide of gossip that made Olivia feel exposed, stripped of privacy and dignity. One morning, as she passed by the break room, she overheard two women, her supposed friends, murmuring behind their hands. "I heard Michael's been seeing Amanda for months," one whispered, eyes darting toward Olivia. The other nodded, a pitying smile tugging at her lips. "You always seem so naive." The sting of their words cut deeper than the bare facts. Vulnerability, it seemed, was another kind of punishment. Despite this, Olivia refused to crumble. There was a fight buried in her heart, a silent pulse that pushed her to breathe through the humiliation. She caught her reflection in a window during a lunch break, a woman worn thin but still standing. The face staring back was tired but determined. It was a reminder. The narrative didn't have to end here. Somewhere beneath the bruises was a story she could reclaim. Yet every step forward was met with setbacks. Michael's cold indifference was a daily assault. After a terse conversation where he denied any intention to reconcile, Olivia's vulnerability surged. The man who once held her hand now regarded her with detached eyes, as if their years together were just chapters in a book he no longer cared to read. At a company event, Michael openly dismissed her presence, moving freely with Amanda, as though Olivia was invisible. The humiliation wasn't just social, it was a deafening echo in her own home, a question mark hanging over every whispered conversation she hoped she didn't hear. Still, through the storm, Olivia's spirit flickered with small sparks of hope. An email from an old college friend, offering a reunion, reminded her that she wasn't alone. A brief, unexpected smile from a stranger on the subway scene hinted at the possibility of kindness in a world full of shadows. And in quiet moments, the thought that she deserved more than betrayal settled like a seed, fragile but persistent. If you've ever faced betrayal or felt the sting of hidden truths unraveling your world, remember that even in the darkest moments, there is strength waiting to be found in the quiet corners of your soul. Olivia's journey has only just begun, and her story is a testament to the power of resilience and self-respect, even when circumstances seem overwhelmingly unfair. Stay with me as we dive deeper into her struggle and the choices she must make. Olivia found herself caught between a relentless tide of despair and a fragile hope that refused to be smothered. Each morning, she forced herself to rise early, to put on a brave face, and to show up at work as though nothing was wrong. But beneath the surface, every glance, every whispered word felt like a pinprick reminding her of her shattered world. She began to keep to herself, burying herself in spreadsheets and emails, seeking solace in the uniformity of numbers and deadlines, hoping that work might drown the pain. Yet every attempt to regain normalcy was met with subtle but stinging obstacles. During a team meeting, a coworker's offhand remark about keeping personal dramas out of the office sent a clear message. Olivia's pain was not theirs to accommodate. At times, she felt suffocated by the invisible walls closing in around her. And the exhaustion weighed heavily, like a shadow she couldn't shake. She missed the warmth of genuine connection, the reassurance of shared trust, but had learned that vulnerability invited judgment in their small circle. Amid the haze of grief and humiliation, Olivia clung desperately to the few slivers of light that still flickered. Her friend Clara, whom she hadn't spoken with in months, reached out one evening with a simple text, "I'm here if you want to talk." The message broke through her isolation, a reminder that not all bridges had burned. They met for coffee the next day, and for the first time in weeks, Olivia found a safe harbor in someone's understanding smile. Clara's gentle encouragement rekindled a spark deep inside, an ember of self-worth that had seemed extinguished. Still, progress came in fits and starts. At home, Oliver's absence gnawed at her. Michael had stopped all communication, leaving the apartment filled with an unsettling silence. She avoided confronting the unopened envelope beneath the kitchen table, the DNA results, each day betting on a glimmer of denial to keep her sane for a little while longer. She knew that facing the truth meant stepping into a storm she wasn't certain she could weather alone. One afternoon, a small victory arrived unexpectedly. Olivia was promoted to manage a new project at work. The recognition was modest, but it was a tangible reminder that her skills and dedication had value independent of her private suffering. It was a moment of grace that whispered, this was not the end of her story. She found herself smiling at the mirror that evening, noting the faint lines around her eyes. A map of pain, yes, but also of survival. Yet questions lurked beneath every hopeful moment. Could she forgive herself for holding on to a marriage that had already begun to unravel? How could she trust her judgment after living in what felt like a carefully constructed illusion? The DNA results remained a silent specter, a truth waiting patiently, daring her to confront it. In twisting corridors of heartache and doubt, Olivia tread lightly. She was learning that healing was not a straight path, but a labyrinth of setbacks and small triumphs. Each day held the potential for growth, or for despair, and she was discovering the courage it took to choose the former again and again. If you've ever felt lost in a sea of confusion, or struggled to piece yourself together after someone shattered your trust, remember that recovery is rarely swift or easy. Olivia's fight is a quiet reminder that even in the darkest valleys, fragile lights begin to glow when we refuse to surrender. Join me as we continue to unravel how her journey takes an even darker turn before true transformation begins. The weeks that followed were merciless. Olivia's fragile hold on hope began to slip as the walls around her closed in tighter, suffocating every glimmer of light she desperately sought. The weight of betrayal pressed down heavier each day, not just the memory of Michael's double life, but the sharp sting of isolation that grew sharper with every passing moment. It was as if the world had turned its back on her, leaving her alone in a cold, unforgiving night. The humiliation escalated painfully one afternoon at work, a day etched into Olivia's memory with brutal clarity. She had arrived early, desperately eager to get through the day without incident, but the whispers started the moment she stepped off the elevator. A group of colleagues, faces masking amusement with practiced ease, exchanged knowing glances as she passed. The subtle cruelty was unbearable. Furtive glances, soft chuckles. An office door cracked just wide enough to catch her name, mingled with snide remarks. Then came the low blow. An anonymous email circulated among staff hinting at unprofessional distractions and personal scandals affecting workplace performance. The message, carefully unsigned, made no direct accusations, but barely disguised its intent to isolate her. Olivia felt the sting of exclusion deeper than any public confrontation. The office, once a place of routine and safety, had transformed into a daily battleground where every step was met with suspicion and disdain. Returning home that evening only worsened the ache. The apartment, once a refuge from the chaos of the outside world, echoed with silence, Michael's belongings gone, the bed left untouched. Olivia's gaze fell on the envelope still resting on the kitchen table, a reminder of secrets yet to be faced. Fear paralyzed her. Opening it meant confronting a truth she both sought and dreaded. She pressed her hands over her face, tears slipping past her fingers silently, the loneliness almost too profound to bear. That night, a crushing wave of despair washed over her. She could feel herself unraveling, the carefully constructed walls of strength crumbling as old doubts screamed louder than ever. How had she been so blind? What worth did she hold now? The weight of public humiliation, personal betrayal, and uncertain future bore down in a relentless tide. Olivia's isolation was absolute. No comfort from friends who had drifted away. No balm for the soul from the life she thought she'd built. But beneath the rubble, something stirred, faint and trembling. The moment she believed herself utterly broken was also the point where seeds of change found fertile ground. Swallowing her pride, Olivia sought counsel. Reaching out to a trusted attorney recommended by Clara. The first consultation was intimidating, yet her resolve hardened as the lawyer laid out options for separation and rights. It was a crucial step toward reclaiming control over a life that had spun so wildly off course. This turning point marked the painful but necessary truth. Olivia would no longer be defined by shame or submission. She would fight to rebuild on her own terms, even if the path ahead was uncertain and fraught with hardship. The days of silent suffering were ending, replaced by a fierce determination to rise no matter how many times she fell. If you've ever felt the crushing weight of betrayal so deep it seems impossible to escape, know that even the darkest moments can birth a quiet rebellion within. Olivia's story reminds us that hitting rock bottom is not the end, but a doorway to rediscovering strength. Stay with me as her journey now pivots toward the first sparks of hope amid the ruins. After that crushing moment in the conference room, where Olivia's ideas were dismissed with a cruel smirk and the snide laughter of her colleagues echoed like a relentless storm inside her chest, she found herself retreating to the small cafe down the street. The warmth of the coffee in her trembling hands was the only comfort in a day turned merciless. The sting of humiliation was fresh, each whispered remark she overheard a knife twisting deeper. Yet, beneath the surface of shame, a faint ember of curiosity flickered, whispering that perhaps this downfall was not the end, but the start of something new. She watched patrons around her, some absorbed in their screens, others laughing with friends, oblivious to the harsh judgments she'd faced just hours before. The world moved forward despite her setbacks, and for the first time that day, Olivia thought about how she might reclaim her narrative. She pulled from her bag a worn notebook, the pages filled with rough sketches and ideas that had fueled her career up to this point. This was where her true strength lived, not in the approval of others who failed to see her worth. That evening, solitude gave her space to reflect. The voices that belittled her faded into background noise as she revisited every failure and triumph inscribed in those pages. One entry, dated years ago, caught her eye. Failure is the soil from which true growth blossoms. It was advice from her mentor, long gone but never forgotten. Olivia realized she had been so focused on the opinions around her that she had lost sight of her own value. Slowly, a plan began to form. She couldn't control the toxic environment at work, but she could control how she responded. Instead of letting humiliation break her, she would use it as a mirror to see what needed to change, not in her character, but in her approach. Maybe her colleagues mocked her because she had been too silent too long. Maybe her voice had been drowned out, not for lack of talent, but for lack of conviction. Yet, doubt still clawed at her resolve. Was it naive to believe she could turn this all around? The shadows of yesterday's laughter lingered, threatening to smother the fragile hope blossoming within. But somewhere, deep inside, a small, unfamiliar feeling took root, a silent promise to herself that she would fight this battle on her terms, with integrity and patience. In the days that followed, Olivia reached out to a former coworker, Marcus, who had quietly admired her dedication but never publicly supported her due to fear of office politics. Their conversations opened her eyes to a truth she had overlooked. Allies existed beyond the facades of rivalry and judgment. Marcus shared insights and suggested subtle ways she could demonstrate her ideas without falling prey to others' sneers. The more Olivia listened and strategized, the clearer it became that this was not a story of defeat, but an invitation to evolve. She began to draft new proposals, not flashy or grandiose, but grounded in authentic solutions and meticulous research. Each page turned over a new possibility, a path marked not by the echoes of mockery, but by steady, purposeful strides. Still, the question lingered. How would those who had scorned her react when she started to reclaim the space they tried to deny her? Would they dismiss her again, or would they be forced to acknowledge the quiet strength that had always been there? Olivia didn't have the answer yet, but she felt the tides shifting beneath her feet. Sometimes growth requires descending into discomfort, into the shadows where one's spirit is tested the most. As the sun set outside her window, casting long, hopeful rays across the pages of her notebook, Olivia knew that her journey was far from over. Painful as it was, the humiliation had revealed a vital truth. Change was inevitable, and with it, opportunity. If you've ever felt crushed by the judgment of others, remember that the darkest moments can be the birthplace of your greatest transformation. Keep looking for those sparks of hope. They might just lead you back to yourself. Weeks passed, and the quiet determination Olivia nurtured finally began to bloom. One afternoon, she found herself invited to present a new project, not in the grand, intimidating conference room where she had been shamed, but in a small, informal meeting with a few key decision-makers. The invitation alone was a small victory, but what happened next would change everything. As Olivia spoke, her voice steady and eyes bright with conviction, the room shifted. Her ideas, once dismissed as naive or irrelevant, now held weight. She presented data meticulously gathered and solutions centered on real challenges the company faced. When she paused, the silence lingered. No mocking whispers, no impatient sighs, only thoughtful consideration. Then, unexpectedly, Jacob, the very colleague who had publicly ridiculed her weeks before, cleared his throat. Olivia braced herself, heart hammering, expecting another cutting remark. Instead, he leaned forward and asked a question, one that was sharp but sincere, probing the depth of her proposal. Olivia answered with calm assurance, the confidence she had rebuilt shining through. The room's atmosphere softened. Others began to ask questions, genuinely engaged. Marcus, sitting quietly near the back, offered a supportive nod. The moment felt surreal, as if the heavy fog of contempt had lifted, revealing a horizon she hadn't dared to imagine. Later that day, Olivia returned to her desk to find an email that made her hands tremble. A senior manager praising her presentation and inviting her to lead a pilot project based on her ideas. The recognition wasn't just professional. It was deeply personal, a validation born not from others' approval, but from her own relentless perseverance. But the transformation wasn't confined to accolades. Word spread, and the same colleagues who had sneered now approached her with cautious respect. Some even apologized, their voices tinged with remorse when they admitted they'd underestimated her. Olivia listened, not with bitterness, but with a quiet strength that came from understanding her worth had never depended on their acceptance. She also discovered an unexpected source of kindness when Sarah, a junior team member who had remained silent during past meetings, thanked Olivia for inspiring her bravery. That moment underscored the ripple effect of resilience. By standing firm, Olivia had given others permission to find their voices. As night fell, Olivia sat by the window, the city lights blinking like stars in acknowledgement. The journey had not erased the pain of humiliation, but it had transformed it into a foundation for growth. She reflected on the path from shame to empowerment, and how the choice to endure hardship with grace had rewritten her story. If you're facing moments when the world seems to cast you aside, remember that perseverance, paired with integrity, can turn tides you never imagined possible. Sometimes, the greatest power lies in the quiet, unwavering belief in yourself. Stories like Olivia's remind us that even in the shadow of doubt, light breaks through. If you feel inspired to embrace your own journey and transform adversity into strength, keep holding on. Your breakthrough may be closer than you think. The following weeks brought a new rhythm to Olivia's life, a rhythm defined not by fear or hesitation, but by purpose and clarity. The pilot project she had spearheaded quickly gained momentum. not simply because it was well-researched, but because Olivia led with a quiet authenticity that challenged the culture of skepticism that had once suffocated her. Her team was small, but dedicated, and together they navigated initial setbacks with a shared resolve that seemed to invigorate even the most cynical observers. One afternoon, the company's CEO requested a full presentation of Olivia's pilot progress to the entire executive board. For many, this could have been a nerve-wracking experience, but Olivia embraced it differently. She prepared meticulously, ensuring every detail was clear, every question anticipated. Yet what truly set her apart was her emotional honesty. She didn't hide the obstacles nor sugarcoat the past. Instead, she openly acknowledged the early resistance she faced and how it fueled her determination to push forward. When she stood in the boardroom, illuminated by the stark glow of projectors and the steady gaze of powerful eyes, Olivia felt a calm surge of certainty. As she spoke, the tension that once gripped her chest was replaced by an exhilarating connection. People weren't just listening, they were truly engaged. Her voice carried conviction born from struggle, her words painting a vision of innovation grounded in resilience. After the presentation, the CEO smiled warmly and commended Olivia for her leadership, not just of the project, but of her own journey. The room filled with applause. Some faces that had once been etched with doubt now shone with respect. Jacob, who had been so quick to ridicule, approached her and extended a genuine handshake, his eyes meeting hers with newfound recognition. Behind that respectful gesture lay the consequences of their earlier judgments. Raphael, one of the most vocal critics, found himself confronted by the undeniable success of Olivia's work. His dismissive remarks lost their footing in the face of clear results and earned respect. It became evident that the culture of undermining others was being dismantled, one act of integrity at a time. More importantly, Olivia's triumph inspired a shift beyond personnel politics. Encouraged by her example, others began to voice ideas without fear of ridicule. Her story had become a beacon within the company, a testament to the power of perseverance and dignity. Olivia herself felt transformed, no longer defined by moments of humiliation, but by her capacity to rise above them. She understood that true strength was not about overpowering others, but about owning one's truth and moving forward with grace. At the close of the day, standing by the window watching the sun cast golden hues over the city skyline, Olivia allowed herself a quiet smile. The road had been difficult, filled with pain and disbelief, but every step had led her here, to a place where justice was more than a word, it was lived. If you ever find yourself doubted or dismissed, remember that claiming your voice and standing with integrity can break down walls and rewrite histories. Just like Olivia, your strength lies in your resilience and belief in yourself. Never underestimate the power of rising and making others see you for who you truly are. Weeks passed, and the quiet determination Olivia nurtured finally began to bloom. One afternoon, she found herself invited to present a new project, not in the grand, intimidating conference room where she had been shamed, but in a small, informal meeting with a few key decision-makers. The invitation alone was a small victory, but what happened next would change everything. As Olivia spoke, her voice steady and eyes bright with conviction, the room shifted. Her ideas, once dismissed as naive or irrelevant, now held weight. She presented data meticulously gathered and solutions centered on real challenges the company faced. When she paused, the silence lingered. No mocking whispers, no impatient sighs, only thoughtful consideration. Then, unexpectedly, Jacob, the very colleague who had publicly ridiculed her weeks before, cleared his throat. Olivia braced herself, heart hammering, expecting another cutting remark. Instead, he leaned forward and asked a question, one that was sharp but sincere, probing the depth of her proposal. Olivia answered with calm assurance, the confidence she had rebuilt shining through. The room's atmosphere softened. Others began to ask questions, genuinely engaged. Marcus, sitting quietly near the back, offered a supportive nod. The moment felt surreal, as if the heavy fog of contempt had lifted, revealing a horizon she hadn't dared to imagine. Later that day, Olivia returned to her desk to find an email that made her hands tremble, a senior manager praising her presentation and inviting her to lead a pilot project based on her ideas. The recognition wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. A validation born not from others' approval, but from her own relentless perseverance. But the transformation wasn't confined to accolades. Word spread, and the same colleagues who had sneered now approached her with cautious respect. Some even apologized, their voices tinged with remorse when they admitted they'd underestimated her. Olivia listened, not with bitterness, but with a quiet strength that came from understanding her worth had never depended on their acceptance. She also discovered an unexpected source of kindness when Sarah, a junior team member who had remained silent during past meetings, thanked Olivia for inspiring her bravery. That moment underscored the ripple effect of resilience. By standing firm, Olivia had given others permission to find their voices. As night fell, Olivia sat by the window, the city lights blinking like stars in acknowledgement. The journey had not erased the pain of humiliation, but it had transformed it into a foundation for growth. She reflected on the path from shame to empowerment, and how the choice to endure hardship with grace had rewritten her story. If you're facing moments when the world seems to cast you aside, remember that perseverance paired with integrity can turn tides you never imagined possible. Sometimes, the greatest power lies in the quiet, unwavering belief in yourself. Stories like Olivia's remind us that even in the shadow of doubt, light breaks through. If you feel inspired to embrace your own journey and transform adversity into strength, keep holding on. Your breakthrough may be closer than you think.